Hello, I hope you're doing well wherever this video finds you. This is the second in a set of 4 videos where I am responding to a student's question about troubleshooting some code, and I'm looking at a couple ways to solve the problem. Again, I recommend you watch these videos in sequence because they build on each other. So what we're doing is we have a simple web page that has a text area and a button I can click, and what we want it to do is when I type in something like Canada, and I hit click me, some data will appear on the screen, which is contained in a list. We're not pulling any data from any online source. Really, this is targeted for students or adults that are learning the basics of list data structures, looping, and web development. You can find solutions as well as a lot of other things on my GitHub site here. Please feel free to pop in and grab, use, give me some feedback. I find I learn a lot from some of the feedback people give me on this. All right, so let's dive in. So in this one, we're going to use this live build virtual-xshell2.html, and I've made this JavaScript file. And so the 3 solutions all have this code in common. So I've linked inside my HTML, I have my button, I have an input type for text, I have a p tag where I'm going to display the results, and then I've linked my JavaScript file. I'm not going to change anything in here except for, in each example, change the different live build file. Okay, so this will be the same every time. We have 3 lists, and these are called parallel list structures. Now, I recognize there's better ways to do this, but again, this is for students who are really just learning about what is a list, how to manipulate them using loop structures, how to check them using if statements. We don't know about multi-dimensional lists in this case, and I want the students to understand what a parallel list structure is, and that is where you'll have a list, and at index 0, and then in another list, index 0, this piece of information corresponds to that piece of information. So we see Canada 2015 7, Ethiopia 2015 353, Kenya 2015 510, Somalia 2015 732. These are called parallel list structures. Now, just for context, if you're just kind of jumping in here, students are building a website that looks at one of the UN sustainability goals, and they're pulling data from the World Health Organization. And all I've done is I've bound the function clicked to that button. So if I come back to my page here and I show you my console down below, notice every time I hit click, it goes in there because it's running this function. So what's the first thing I want to do? Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to actually get the value from the input box. So I'm going to use document object model here, document.get element by ID, and we're going to get fname. And then we're going to access the value inside of fname. So if we just save this, and before we go over, there's my input box, and I can see the ID called fname. And so what this is doing is this accessing the value here. And let me just show you by doing this, console.log value. And if I come back into here and refresh this page, and I put in something like Canada, and I hit click, there you go. I've grabbed the value and put it in there. Perfect. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to want to loop through my list and check if that value is in there. But I need to make a decision about what to do. So let's just start by writing a loop to look at every element in the list countries and see if it's there. So let's write a for loop. For I equals 0, I is less than countries, dot length, I is equal to I plus 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an if statement, and I'm going to say if countries at I is equivalent to value. And I'm going to do this, console.log, found it. Oh, the exclamation right there. And let's get rid of that for now. So let's talk about this. I call this a bread and butter structure. It's that structure that it's really good to know. Students often say to me, what do I need to memorize? And I often talk about how it's not about memorization, it's about understanding the situation and adjusting your code, but this is something to memorize. This is a standard loop that will look at every element in a list, because I is going to start at the 0th index, which is the first element, and then it's going to continue as long as I is less than the length of the list, and then we increment I by each time, 1 by each time. So when it enters in here, it says countries at I, so countries at 0, is it the value? And if it is, it says found it. And if it isn't, it goes to the bottom of the loop and then increments I. So if I save this now, and I refresh this page, and I put Canada, sure enough, I get found it. If I put Japan, it's not there. And I'm going to show you what the students' problem was that they had when they sent me the code. They actually did a really great job and they were really close to getting this to work, but they made a really common mistake that I see a lot with younger programmers, is they did this. Console.log, not there. And so what they're doing is they wrote the loop correctly, they did this correctly, but then they say it's not there. And the problem with putting an else statement here is, notice now, if I come in here and I reload this, and I put in Canada, it says found it, but it says not there 3 times. And that's because the else structure is inside the loop. So when it's searching this list and it says, oh, are you Canada? Yep. Prints out found it. But then when it goes to the next element, it says, are you Canada? No, not there. Are you Canada? No, not there. Are you Canada? No, not there. And so what we want to do is we really can't make a decision if the element doesn't exist until we're outside the loop. And so it's down here that we want to put an if statement to check is essentially, and we'll talk about how to do this in a second, if element is in list. Okay, obviously that's not proper code, but basically if I find the element in the list, we're going to do something else. We're going to do something else. And so the question comes up, how do we track if the element is in the list? To do that, we create a variable, and I call it found. This is a Boolean, and I'm going to set found to false. What this means is that I'm going to assume initially that the value is not in the list. So this assumes value is not in the list. And so what I do down here is this if statement is I'm going to say if value, sorry, not value, if found is equivalent to true. And we're going to say console.log, and we're going to say found it, and I'm going to say console.log, not there. So now if I save this and run it, we're a little closer, but it's not quite there yet. And I'm hoping you look at that and can kind of see where the problem is. It says found it, and then it says not there once. So why is that? Well, that's because what's happening is I enter this loop, and then it finds Canada, it says found it, and then it finishes the loop, and then it says, well, found is still false because I haven't changed it, and then it prints not there. So what I have to do is I'm not going to print anything in here. I'm just going to say found is equal to true. Basically what happens is all this loop does is it doesn't print anything, it doesn't change anything, it just simply is going to set this found to true if it finds the country, and then it can print out that it's found it. So now if I save this and I come back into here, and I refresh this page and I say Canada, found it, and I get it once. If I put Japan, and I get not there. Perfect. So what I want to do now is I want to update the information. So if I, with these 3 values, so Canada, 2015, and 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to set the inner HTML. So if I do, well, let's actually start with that. So I'm going to say document.get element by ID, and I'm going to get this p tag here and we see the ID is results. So I'm going to get element by ID, and I'm going to get results. And I'm going to say dot inner HTML equals, and I'm just going to say found it. And I'm going to get rid of that console.log. I don't want that anymore. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say not there. So now I've gone, as what this does is this gets the element by ID results. It sets the inner HTML to found it. So if I come back into here and I refresh this, I don't need the console anymore, and I can put in Canada and hit click me, found it. Japan, not there. Perfect. But what I want to do is I want to actually get the information from the list and make some sort of statement from that. So I'm actually going to start off by I'm going to paste a large line of code in here because this was something the student wrote. So what they wanted to print out is they wanted to print out, oh, you can see I have this done correctly here, but let's just undo this for a second. So what did they want to print it out? They wanted to print out this is way too big. That's okay, we'll put it on here anyways and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to print out, we're going to set the inner HTML to the value, which is essentially the country that I typed in, and it says has the maternal mortality rate of ratio. So what are we doing? We're looking for, from ratio, the same index. So if I know it's Canada, I want that 7. But how do I get that? Because I need to remember the index value. So what students sometimes do is they put an I there. But the problem is that the I no longer exists because this loop is done. So we need to add one more variable here. We're going to make another variable called LOC, and we're going to set that to -1. And if I happen to find the value, I'm going to say LOC to I. And so what that does is not only do I do two things. I say, hey, I found it, but I'm also now noting the location of where I found it, and I can set that here. So we have the value has the maternal mortality rate of ratio at lock, death per 100,000 live births, and year. And what do we want? We want year at LOC. Now you may look at this and say, well, these are all 2015, but I bet you what the student's done is the data they've collected, it probably could be different years based on when the data was collected. It just happened that all of these were 2015. So let's take a refresh of this. And let's put in Canada, click me. Canada has the maternal mortality rate ratio of 7 deaths per 100,000 live births in 2015. If I put in Japan, not there. So the question is, what do I want to print there? Well, I don't want to print not there. I'm just going to grab what the student had. The student did that. And so now I just have some sort of message in there. So now if I refresh this and I put Canada, I get the value. But if I put something like Japan, I get some message that says there's no data for this country at the moment. Countries with data are. So let's try another one. Let's put in Kenya. Kenya has a maternal mortality ratio of 510 deaths per 100,000 live births in the year 2015. And so why is that? Because what we've done is we've gone through the loop, we found Kenya, and we've stored the third index, the second index, 0, 1, 2, and then we've pulled the data from the second index and the second index. I hope that video helped. In our third video, we're going to take this and we're going to clean it up a little bit, because you might look at this and say, there's an easier way, and there is. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Have a wonderful day.